We often hear about the major cities, Birmingham and Baton Rouge and New Orleans and the boycotts. We hear about those struggles, but what we don't often hear about is the quieter, more poignant stories of the fight for civil rights for African Americans in those rural areas.
You're listening to Find the Good News, episode 125, The Quieter Stories, a good conversation featuring Rebecca Blankenbaker, President and CEO of Cane River National Heritage Area. Find the Good News is produced by Parker Brand Creative Services, a branding agency that thinks sideways, pushes forward, and gets your brand up. See what else we do at parkerbrandup.com. Have you ever been to a place that felt alive? As though it were not only a destination defined by its offerings and attractions, but rather an actual living, breathing character in the stories of many lives across generations. Nearly 30 years ago, I visited a place like this in central Louisiana, and I've been returning year after year to spend time with this special location. Throughout the years, it has welcomed me as it has many others, and integral pivots in my life story have taken place in this region's arms, allowing me to laugh, learn, wonder, search, love, grieve, and heal. The Cane River region and the historic city of Natchitoches, Louisiana has been a good friend to me, and I've had the honor of working with some of its brightest children and patrons. In this episode, I had the pleasure of visiting with one of the Cane River region's most resourceful and passionate stewards, Rebecca Blankenbaker, President and CEO of Cane River National Heritage Area. Our paths crossed by chance years ago on a partnership project for the No Man's Land region, an even larger geographic area along Louisiana's western border with a wild and textured tale of its own. It was clear to me at that time that Rebecca was a knowledgeable and effective leader with the resources and know-how to preserve the historic places that wind along the Cane River and help capture and present the colorful, yet often quiet, stories of the people that have struggled, settled, and prospered along its banks. Over the past 15 years, with each visit to Natchitoches, I have noticed projects that have brought increased education, important historic preservation, and a high level of regional and local beautification. These enhancements have changed the face of this charming city and region, my old friend, while retaining all of the familiar, warm features that have called so many back to the Cane River area over and again. I feel very lucky to have encountered Rebecca Blankenbaker and her team at Cane River National Heritage Area, and am humbled to now have an opportunity to touch projects that will help keep Natchitoches, Louisiana a highly sought-out destination for wanderers. It's clear that through Cane River National Heritage Area's partnerships and projects, the Natchitoches area will continue to be of interest to seekers, a delight to travelers, a place to explore, to rest, renew, to contemplate the past, and consider the road ahead. So, I invite you to meet my dear friend and colleague, Rebecca Blankenbaker, and to know her good works. Now, let's cue the music and press play on a little good news.
Wake up, it's morning, dreaming up a story. I can hear the way it's going, 'cause you're laughing in your sleep. On the path to your deliverance, and a holy wall of light pouring through your window.
Old news, bad news, fake news. Sometimes you want to shut those channels down and seek a better source. With Find the Good News, I tune into good people doing good works wherever I can find them. I scan the signals looking for educators and students, scientists and spiritual leaders, writers, musicians and artists, business owners, volunteers, and active citizens who offer their time, resources, and talents to build a better world for others. In each episode, I tune into the hearts and minds of my extraordinary guests. I uncover the critical life experiences that shape them, the principles that guide them, and the foundational philosophies that keep them on their path of goodness. There's a lot of news, and it's a noisy world. My name is Orrin Parker, and I'm cutting through the static to find the good.
And I love you just as well.
So I'm with Rebecca Blankenbaker with Cane River National Heritage Area today. This has been a long time coming for me. You and I've had a lot of private conversations, but
We've never done this before.
No, it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's my first podcast.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised to hear that, actually. When you said that, I was like, wow, Rebecca is such a eloquent speaker, and you're so informative. And every time I've ever watched you or recorded you, I'm amazed at how you can just rattle off facts that make sense and have value, because some people cannot do that. I mean, I can't do it. I'm going to go back and listen to this in editing, and I'll be going, oh my gosh, you jumped from this to that, you have a broken sentence, you never went back and finished what you were saying.
We are always the most critical of ourselves.
Yeah.
But you do not sound like you think you sound. You sound well spoken and put together and prepared always.
Well, I think it all ultimately it's just comes back to talking to good people, and then the thrust of what we're trying to do with this. We're in brand building, and I think that's where you and I met, was working on branding projects or marketing projects. And I know the people who listen to the show regularly will probably get tired of hearing me tell the story, but marketing is definitely communication. And there's definitely an art to it, and there's some repetitiveness to it as well. You have to rinse and repeat. You got to put some signals out there that are consistent and in color, sound, flavor, tenor, tone, all of that. But the tools of marketing, for me personally, aren't always satisfying a personal itch I have, and that is the real human heartbeat behind a brand. I love the paint job. I love the logos. I love the cool technical aspect of it all. I mean, even for this episode with you, we've got some new promos that we're ready to launch that we're like, okay, we're going to show off a little bit more visually. But ultimately, that stuff's just color and sound and neat looking. Like, who is Rebecca, and why does that matter for Cane River National Heritage Area?
I'm a sucker for good branding too, and that's where we really hit it off as partners in the world of heritage tourism. And we've enjoyed working with Parker Brand, and it's been a really great relationship. You've really helped us elevate Cane River National Heritage Area on a public platform. I probably should back up and just sort of share what Cane River National Heritage Area is.
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Right.
For those folks who are not as familiar with the world of heritage tourism and the world of national heritage areas, we are one of 2 national heritage areas in the state of Louisiana. We're the oldest national heritage area. We turned 30 this year in the state. We are founded because we are Louisiana's first Creole colony. We're Louisiana's first melting pot, where we have Native Americans, French, Spanish, African influences all coming here to Louisiana's oldest city, Natchitoches. And the story that we tell as part of Cane River National Heritage Area is how the folks of Cane River, the folks and the people of Natchitoches, make a way of life dependent upon the land, the river, and each other. They did it back in 1714 when this place was founded, and they continue it today. We're stuck in the middle of Louisiana, smack central in central Louisiana, and it gets tough sometimes not being near large metropolitan areas, but one of the things that we have going for us is our charm and our people, and I have the pleasure of telling those stories every day.
So I'm very curious, and I don't know if I actually know the answer to this. What's your path to here?
To the heritage area?
Yeah.
It was interesting, I'll say that much. I am born and raised in New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
I lost my accent somewhere along the way.
Okay.
I've been in Natchitoches for about 20 years, so I think I'm more Natchitoches native now.
Natchitoches is home now.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, sure.
But I found my way here through Northwestern State University.
Okay.
I'm an alumni. I have both a bachelor's and a master's degree from Northwestern. I found my way through the heritage management path. I have a history degree and a heritage tourism degree. And really, I've always had a passion for studying the history, finding out where we come from, where our roots are, because I firmly believe that looking forward and building forward, you got to understand your past. And I've just always been one of those people who just was curious. I'd sit with my grandparents and ask questions and ask them how they used to do things, and that sort of bled into my career as I started to figure out what it is I wanted to do. I did hop around a little in college, was a public relations major for a little while. And when I finally decided to change paths, I knew that I wanted to build community and make a difference through sharing the stories of where people live, how people adapt to a community and build a community and make it their own. And that's where I found tourism. That's where I found heritage tourism. It's where the love of the past meets the future, and you get to interact with people and roll out the red carpet and be hospitable, but share a little bit of yourself as well.
I love that. And, heritage tourism, that's not a term that I hear roll out of my mouth too often. But, when I see you sitting here and hear you say that, and like the smile on your face, I can tell that's sort of the chocolate and peanut butter of what you care about. It's like something special. I think this area is special too. And maybe it's because maybe I don't get to travel as much as I'd like to, but I remember coming to Natchitoches for the first time in the 90s, like right after high school. It was the first time I came through with a girlfriend's parents. They were bringing her to school, and so I took the trip with them. I'd never been to the place. I'd never been to the Christmas festival. And on that trip, we went by the old cemetery. And as you know, I love going to the old cemetery, American Cemetery. And I don't know, I got even as a young person, who's growing up and, haven't found yourself yet and figured out who you are. I had the strong sense that I was touching or standing in something old. I think for the first time, like it really hit me. I think the only other time as a young person that settled on me, the history, was when my parents had taken me to the Alamo. Mm-hmm. There was something about touching the walls and seeing like the men's initials and their names carved in the walls, and like it hit me like, wow, these people that I'm reading these placards about, they were here. Like it made it very real. And I don't know, going to that spot did that for me, and it never went away. Like it sort of wedged into me that I can come here and touch the past, but also made me appreciate being from Louisiana in a way that I hadn't before. That there is something here, something old, and then realizing, oh, you're in the oldest settlement in the Louisiana Purchase. And then you start to pull the dots together, at least for me, of what you're learning in school. You're like, oh, the Louisiana Purchase. You learn in school, you move on. But then you really think about what that really means. And you go, oh, wow. And then there's a whole other history attached to that. I don't know. It was just touching in a way. And I've always felt like I can come here and kind of reboot and just get back to the history. And so connecting with you all those years later, it was like an expansion of that. I had really never considered the rivers connection. I don't know why. Again, it's just, I hate to use the word ignorance, but it was just ignorance, and just never seeking out that information. And so you've always reminded me, through Cane River, how important that river has been to the development of the central Louisiana and beyond.
Yeah. I think for me, the river symbolizes our innate, as Louisianians, as descendants of folks who built Louisiana as the place that it is today. It symbolizes that grit that's sort of in our blood. We are home to Steel Magnolias. Steel Magnolias was written and filmed here. But there's something about that name, and I know why Bobby Harling named it that way, and it's to honor his mother and his mother's friends and that steel backbone that they tend to have through life's just challenges. And I think that history is a reminder of the challenges and the paths that we have to take to get to where we want to be. And I think that's why I love this job so much, because it is about honoring the past, but also let's celebrate where we are and where we're coming from. And sometimes that takes a whole lot of elbow grease, rolling up our sleeves and getting through some murky water. But that to me is what Louisiana is all about. That's why we're a place where people want to come and spend their time.
I want to share, just for people, you and I have talked about this several times, but I think the listeners might really get something out of this. Some things that we just don't consider. And I think I brought it up to you that I always come up here in August. Hottest time of the year, why anybody would want to spend all day outside in that time of year. But I do, is there's a date that it's attached to a special memory for me. And I started noticing years ago certain flowers that would bloom. And you and I were talking about I said, there's this little yellow flower that always shows up this time of year, and I look forward to seeing it. Start describing it to you, and you were like, oh, it's the copper lily. And so I'm like, yeah, okay, well, that's what it's called. I had no idea. And you told me this story that I think about all the time when I think about how one thing connects to another. And, you know, for me, that flower symbolizes peace and comfort and renewal and nostalgia, even grief a little bit. And so here's this person, I'm going to talk about myself separately. Like, here I am, this character in this play of life, you know, and here's this man who's looking forward to seeing these flowers that are in this area at this time of year. And then you tell me, like, yeah, well, you know, like how those migrated here. And I was like, oh my gosh, so fascinating that this little moment in time, this little flower that means so much to me in this city, in this area, has a story. Do you mind?
Sure. So, a little history lesson for those listeners who may not know. Natchitoches was founded by the French in 1714, and there was a French trading post that was established. And then 3 years later, the Spanish, who were in Texas, decided to establish a Spanish fort about 10 miles away from that French fort, so they could protect their interests in the West. So here you have these two forts, these two sort of enemies. You know, their soldiers are rather poor, sort of there just because they have to be, and they're forbidden from trading with each other. They're forbidden from communicating with each other, and there's a lot of trade headed back for the Spanish fort back and forth to Mexico City. The Spanish were always traveling back and forth through what is today Texas, and they would bring with them, they'd transfer cattle, they would transfer goods, and they would also transfer all of the flora that they would come across. And one of those flora just happened to be the copper lily, which is this beautiful wildflower that pops up in the hint of the fall. So right when we start to get those cool mornings in August that we're hoping will last through the middle of the day, but they never do. They burn off. And it's just a symbol. It symbolizes to us here that fall's coming. But they're a lasting legacy of the Spanish influence here on Cane River. It's something that we can see every year like clockwork. And it's only here because they travel through the El Camino Real, which is the Royal Road, and that would take everyone back from Texas to Mexico City. So we can still see that. So we can still see portions of the El Camino in our roadways today. Yeah. We travel along one every day on Highway 6.
Sure, to come here. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I love that. I love the idea that, you know, this thing was happening. These creatures were being, you know, brought across this trail. And, you know, eating along the way and you know, and nature takes its course, and you now have this sort of permanent reminder that's just in nature, you know, of this whole expedition, these lives that were probably devoted to that trail, like moving goods across that trail, you know. And I don't know, it's just a way to touch history. And I was, you know, it would affected my life and my psychology, my emotions, and to think that there's another story attached to something. You know, we add our own meaning to things and finding another meaning. I don't know. I just thought it was the thrust of history, you know, just kind of like, wow, you know, all these little things. I think about history quite a bit. You know, I tell my wife, I said, you know, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately in regards to history is, the things that the people that had to survive. I was like, you know, my grandfather was in World War II. Both my other grandfather was in the Korean War, and my great grandfather was in World War I. My father was in Vietnam. And I said, now you're talking about the biggest wars, right, in the last 100 years, American wars anyway. And every one of those people had to survive all kinds of circumstances just for me to be sitting here with you today to talk about history. That's fascinating that all these survivors, to be a child of luck, maybe even survival, you know, and then you go, and then what happens? What am I going to, makes you think like, what am I going to do with my life? You know,
that will change the history, the course of history for your family and for your descendants. I think about that often too, especially, as we start working with our partners and they're coming up with new programs and things, and there's new research that's done, and you just think about how one little decision or one little step forward in this direction could change the course of history for your family. One decision to go to school and to get that degree, one decision to marry that person just could change the course. And we see it when we start to do some research projects for museums, for exhibits and things like that. You can see how this person's decision to say, we're marrying this person, or we're buying this piece of land, how that just changed the course of history, not only for that family, but also we can look at the land today, how that affected how people settled and where we cultivated the city that we live in.
That's one thing that I would say Cane River National Heritage Area really accomplished as a frequent visitor. I've come here again since the early 90s to this very day. I make it a few trips a year. Some are business, some are pleasure. And sometimes I come by myself. But when I started coming and started seeing, and this is before you and I had connected, but started seeing the historical plaques around town, there'd always been like statues and various things, but like the little pocket parks, I'm assuming, is that what they're called? The pocket parks? Those started popping up, and then I'd see the plaques. And then even like there was one in the cemetery when I went one year, it was new. And I thought, oh, wow. And I still didn't have that awareness, like that one entity. I saw the logo, but I didn't really know what it was or any story behind it. Just that alone started adding texture to my visits, and when I would see a new one pop up, I was like, wow, somebody's putting a lot of work into these, not just from a design point of view and a construction point of view, but just the research alone and the imagery.
Yeah. So the path to Natchitoches as a destination has not been, like most things, has not been straightforward, and it hasn't been quick. We talk about what it looked like it was here in the 90s. That's when we really start to see sort of the beginning fruits of labor start to show. So, we were part of the early preservation movement. Natchitoches was. We're the oldest city in the state, and we're older than New Orleans by 4 years. We had, at one time, there were only 2 National Historic Landmark Districts in the state, the French Quarter and Natchitoches. There are a few more that have been added since then, but we're the oldest. And so we sort of were at the cusp of the preservation movement in the 70s and in the 60s. And then but we're still sort of a sleepy little town. The Red River doesn't flow through the middle of town. It flows through the north. So it sort of skips by. We're an agricultural area that's pretty rural, to say the least. And we're just sort of a sleepy little destination. Charming is what people would call us. But it wasn't unheard of to walk down Front Street and see a dollar store and an auto shop. There were hardly any restaurants, and there were a lot of vacancies. And then in 1989, the play Steel Magnolias, written by Bobby Harling, who is a native of Natchitoches, he brings that here to be filmed. And we have all these big movie stars who we are all familiar with, who are here for the summer and filming this phenomenal movie. And from that, I think that the citizens of Natchitoches and the people of Cane River have started to take pride in place and start to say, we've got something here that maybe we should take a little more care of. And so we start to see sort of this reinvestment in downtown and what today we know as the historic district. We start to see some new businesses pop up and some new development. Along that time, we're designated as a national Main Street community, one of the first in the, there's a couple of others that were ahead of us, but we're one of the first few that are established here in Louisiana. Main Street builds that connection between historic preservation and economic development. So we're saving places, but we're also putting money back into the economy. And then in 1994, Congress creates the Cane River Creole National Historical Park, which is a national park, and then the Cane River National Heritage Area, my organization. And that's where we really start to see some federal dollars and investment push back into the community. As a National Heritage Area, we are a nonprofit organization. There are 60-something of us across the nation today. At the time, there were probably only 10 of us in the nation. And we all do something, it's the best way to describe it is grassroots preservation and community development with National Park Service principles. So preservation, cultural conservation, but moving the needle forward with economic development and community development in the best way that suits a community. So our organization, while I will say thank you for your kind words about the signage and the texture, because that's exactly how I would describe what we're doing in building Natchitoches and Cane River as a destination, is adding texture and adding product, making it more user-friendly and visitor-friendly. But it's definitely a team.
Sure.
A team project.
Well, that's one of the things I would say about Cane River National Heritage Area and you and your team is that you guys, and I say that because of some of the types of projects we work on, I can see that. It's not like some entities where we're going in and it's like, okay, we're just branding for that entity. Almost all of the projects that you are where you're partnering or you're saying, hey, I'm going to lend my assistance and resources to this preservation product, this landmark, this rejuvenation project, whatever it may be. And then you bring all of that to bear on that and plug in with other groups. And so in a way, you're not front facing to some degree. You're like the force behind things a lot of times.
That's exactly it. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being behind the scenes, but it is exactly, we find that our help is better used in being the technical assistance and really helping connect our partners to the resources that they might be missing. And, hearing the stories of the people of Cane River come best out from their voices themselves. So that's always been my model. I've been with the Heritage Area since 2010. Started as a little baby graduate assistant and have worked my way up. But that's always been the motto, is to let folks speak for themselves and share their stories from their point of view and not overstep. As a agency who has governmental funding, who sort of has that, who wears the big boots sometimes in the conversation, we've always sort of been the convener, the community convener, the person who brings folks to the table and says, okay, how can we make this project work so that each entity gets what they need out of it and we can make Natchitoches a better place moving forward. And that's where a lot of our projects come from. You obviously help us really create the brand that is Cane River, which really has just sort of soared in the last few years and given us the tools that we need to make us, I think, shine in a setting, whether it's social media or whether it's any of the other marketing materials.
You're being very, very kind.
Well, when you can talk to your graphic designer and say, this is my vision.
Well, I guess, I take that for granted because I don't know what being on the other side of that's like. Well, that's not 100% true, but it's been years since I've been on the other side being the client, and had something made for us. So I can see, but I do try to take, I guess, that perspective when we're putting ourselves out there. It's like, what do I want? And I know I oversimplify my philosophy about it, but it's the same relationship I have with my lawn care guy. My lawn, and this is not to even oversimplify it too much, but I mean, I hire him because I don't have time and nor the equipment to do what he does. I respect him immensely, and I appreciate it that he understands that, hey, you don't have the time nor the equipment to do this. And so he just comes and does it. And it's just an understanding. And I'm like, he doesn't expect I don't expect any more from him than that, And if I do need him to do something extra, I ask him. And if he doesn't do it, he'll tell me. If he does, he'll do whatever he can to make that happen. And I really know that seems like an odd comparison, but it's something that I find missing in business a lot of times with vendors. It's like, Communication, responsiveness, a willingness to give something a shot, to try, to want to do it good. I mean, I know that seems like the core basics that you think everybody's going to have, but I don't always experience that.
I would say that that's exactly how I feel about our relationship with Parker Brand, is that you are just an extension of the team, and having you on board and being able to pick up the phone, because we had a partner come in and say they're working on a project, but they need a graphic designer to help them with signage. And we say, well, hold on, we can help you there.
Right. You're bringing us as an extension of your team, as a resource to bear on that project, which is related to your, the Cane River overall scope. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
Need a brand boost? Parker Brand Creative Services is your go-to team. From graphic design to video production, we craft your vision with precision. Visit parkerbrandup.com and let's build a great brand together.
Looking back on everything that I see y'all doing, just recently, y'all were involved in a project that, for me personally, I think back, I go, wow, as a young man, I experienced this spot, particularly that's in this area, in a completely different way than the way it is able to be experienced now. And that is such a treasure. And it's a train depot. Years and years ago, my sister and I, we both were photographers at different points, in high school. I did it, then she was doing it. So I took her up here. I was like, well, let's go up to Natchitoches. There's a lot of cool places to take pictures. I had went to Northwestern as well. I did photography, and I always felt like it was just ripe to go out and practice your skills as a photographer. So we came up here looking for cool architecture and just places where lighting might be playing off the walls. And the train depot was one of those places, but it was abandoned, essentially. I mean, it was just sort of, I hate to say in disrepair, but
Oh, yeah.
it was wild. I mean, and I don't know where they're at, but I still have the pictures from that shoot. And they're some of the coolest pictures, and that was where it stuck in my mind. I just okay, well, that's the old train place, whatever. We got the pictures, and I just forgot about it. And then here, all these years later, to now look at what is. I mean, I know, again, a partnership, mind you, made all that happen, but y'all were involved in rejuvenating that.
But also, it goes back to that our earlier part of this conversation where we talk about one move and one decision could change the course. The Texas and Pacific Railway Depot here in Natchitoches was built in 1928 at the height of the Jim Crow era. So the height of segregation here in the South, and it had separate and unequal entrances, separate ticket windows, separate waiting areas, separate restrooms, everything separate. And as things go, mechanization, things change, and in 1969 the depot was closed to passenger rail and essentially just boarded up as is. It was never forced to desegregate, never forced to integrate. It was just closed up and boarded up and sort of preserved as that timepiece in the height of Jim Crow. And for years the community fought to have it preserved. It's sort of been this symbol for the African American community because of where it's situated in town. It's situated in West Natchitoches, which is a historically African American neighborhood. Very industrial area. Warehouses surround it. It's a railroad, so that's
makes sense. Sure.
But today it is an area in a neighborhood that struggles with blight and with vacant lots. And for the past, I would say, I think I have to up it. I've been saying 40 years, but it might be 50 years, or getting close to that the community and the city have wanted to do something with that property. The city owned the depot, and for many years, the Black Heritage Committee, the National Park Service, the Heritage Area have all tried to make small steps to make that depot into something that not only honors the transportation history, but also truly honors the fight for civil rights.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 2019 where we had a new superintendent at our national park who was looking for a new space for the park to land. The park manages two fully complete and intact Creole cotton plantations downriver, Oakland and Magnolia. But their story that they tell at the park is from the beginning of slavery and establishing Cane River through emancipation, and then the fight, the Great Migration, as mechanization is coming and introduced to agriculture. It's pushing out many of our laborers who are working on the plantation, and they are moving to big cities like Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles. Many of our folks are moving out west. And they're going through the depot. And so the depot made sort of this perfect sense as being sort of this city touchstone for the national park to sort of have a connection with its visitors. And really, that partnership is what has made this project move forward. So for the past 3 years, the heritage area, the city, and the National Park Service have worked to preserve this building as its home will be for the headquarters of the national park, and as the National Park Service does so well, it will interpret the civil rights story for African Americans in Natchitoches and Cane River, but more broadly, this fight for civil rights in the rural South. We often hear about the major cities, Birmingham and Baton Rouge and New Orleans and the boycotts and we hear about those struggles. But what we don't often hear about is the quieter, more poignant stories of the fight for civil rights for African Americans in those rural areas where it was incredibly dangerous and just scary when you hear the stories. When we hear the stories of the past, there's now a place to tell those stories, and there's a home. And who better than the National Park Service to help lead that role? And help us sort of build some bridges in the community and heal some wounds and move forward together.
I love what you just said. I was thinking it as you were talking, the quieter stories. I just love that phrase because that really is the stuff that makes everything happen, really. As you said, there's big sensational things. And I would honestly say that just is the perfect way to phrase my experience with this whole area. Is it's a quieter story. It's beautiful though. It's interesting. I guess I wasn't this way when I was younger, but now I can really get the sense that I could come here and spend a week enjoying, sure, good food and good shops and all the things that are in that historic area, the historic district that people are so familiar with. But what you're talking about is getting outside of that particular area, starting perhaps there, but then spreading out in every direction along the Cane River and the neighborhoods that are surrounding that area. And there's a story, quiet stories everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
We're also focusing we realize it's not always about saving buildings. We have to save our landscape as well. So, marking this 30th anniversary has been something poignant for us as an organization because we have done a considerable amount of preservation. I'd argue that we're probably one of the honor roll participants for the state of Louisiana on how to make preservation improve your economy and improve the quality of life. But we have only touched the surface when it comes to outdoor recreation and landscape conservation and trying to conserve what are our very intriguing natural resources here. Cane River is home to all kinds of species of flora and fauna, and we've only scratched the surface. And building trails and creating more walkability in this community is something that we're also focusing on and sort of redirecting our attention maybe in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite trails is right next to us right here. I love hiking that trail, one of the Grady Irwin trails.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's nature. What exactly if you don't mind,
Sure.
I brought it up. What exactly is that, so the listener?
So the Grady Irwin Nature Preserve is owned by Northwestern State University. It is a study area for their biology department, which has morphed into more of a STEM school, and it's getting some traction. Pretty big projects, and some really great students are coming out of that program. But this is sort of the last pristine ecosystem in this region. And they use it to study all different types of, I am not a biology expert, so they experiment out there and sort of see what nature does. And it is right next door. We have big plans for this area that we're in right here. My new neighbor.
That's exciting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got some great photos over the years of just going out there different times a year, which is it's like it's hidden. To be honest with you, I kind of feel like it's a secret. To some degree.
The biology department would like for
when I've went hiking out there, it feels like, and I know it's not true, but you get the feeling like you're the only person that's out there.
Absolutely. I've gone out on a couple of hikes during my lunch break, and I need to bring my phone next time. I had a few scares with deer that scared me.
Oh, yeah.
But there's just a tremendous amount of just animals and species of plants that I've never seen.
True.
And we had a black bear across the street
Really?
a few months ago.
Oh,
yes. Wow. So
yeah, I use the iNaturalist app for plant identification and insects and things like that. And I get out there and I'm just like, I can't get through the trail because you're stopping and looking at all, especially depending on what time of year, the different colors of berries that are out there. Don't eat them all, but, or just the way the leaves turn. There's such a variety of just things to see. You can occupy your time for sure if you're interested in that sort of thing. And we worked with you on that sign design, right? Okay. Yeah, that's a cool area. I love it. That's one of my favorite things to do. But y'all have a lot of waterways here beyond the Cane River, which obviously that's the big one that it's in your name. But there's a lot of eco-tourism to be enjoyed up here for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, we have the Red River, but we also have Kisatchie National Forest. Yeah. Which is the only national forest in the state of Louisiana. There's 7 districts, and we're home to one, the largest. And we have Briarwood Nature Preserve, which is a world-renowned nature preserve where Caroline Dorman called home. She was the first female employee of the National Forest Service, and she preserved all kinds of species out there. And Bailey is the new director for Briarwood, and she is kicking butt, I like to say.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I'll just mention it just to give them a little boost. This should come out before their bio bash, but we're going to go to that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I've been wanting to go up there for a while and bring the kids, and I'm looking forward to that.
We have people from all over the world that come to Briarwood to study the species of plants, and just it's phenomenal that that's right there, but it's a quiet little hidden gem that not many people know.
Well, and that, I mean, now again, talking about Cane River area, and if I'm not incorrect, thinking about some of the maps we've done, Briarwood kind of falls in that umbrella.
It is part of the National Heritage Area, and we are proud to partner with them. We've done a couple of preservation projects out there. They were hit by a tornado a couple of years ago in Caroline.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, Caroline Dorman's log cabin was damaged during that event, so we helped with some preservation. We've helped with some, I hope to help Bailey in the future with some marketing and branding, and maybe be able to. But
you can definitely tell that was since Bailey's. I don't know if that was when she came on as what's the term? Caretaker, perhaps?
Site manager?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But I noticed you can definitely see a change in their communication efforts and things like that.
I think that goes with it, just her youthfulness, her energy. She's just been great to work with, and I've only scratched the surface of working with her.
Your brand deserves the best. At Parker Brand Creative Services, we build better brands with creative precision. From graphic design to digital marketing, we think sideways, push forward, and get your brand up. Trust the work, not the pitch. View our extensive galleries at parkerbrandup.com.
I've had an opportunity recently to travel to the parts of the state that I hadn't been to in years. And I don't know, there's something about going to a place you haven't been in a long time and seeing how much it's changed, because if you've been a child, you've got an old memory. Things are smaller than you remember them, and we recently went to some places like that, and it fascinates me just to kind of close your eyes and really try to remember what it looked like. And I do that when I come here all the time. I mean, for people who've never been to this area, which I don't know who that is who's listening to this, but let's say you've never been to this area, what you're going to see today is not like what you would have saw 30 years ago.
No.
or 25 years ago when I first started really coming up here. I mean, the whole riverfront area has changed dramatically. There's just so much more that elevates that history, in my opinion, that you can really slow down and stop and read and like know where you're standing, instead of just going, I like this place, it feels historic, it feels like something happened here. No, you can actually see it and go, oh wow, this is something important. Even like Still Magnolias, I mean, one of the pocket parks y'all have devoted to please forgive me, the name is
Susan Harling.
Yeah, that touches my heart. You know, I know that there's a real story behind the Still Magnolias play and book and movie. But going to that pocket park the first time I ever went there, it was like a cool Saturday morning in the fall. I'd never been there before, and I walked up on that, and the development of it, the seating, the fountain, the signage with the story and the photos. I mean, I wept. I did. I was like, gosh, I just never really stopped to let it hit me the way that pocket park hit me. And what an experience, you know, to get your heart all entangled in a place.
Yeah.
Y'all made that.
Thank you. You know, when I first started, we've always been known as, well, we're Louisiana's oldest city. And that's fantastic. But what is it beyond? What happened after we were founded? What are those little stories that really make this place interesting and add that texture we were talking about, that sort of make that quilt that we're all trying to build? How does that add to it? And so the pocket parks is a system that we created with the Historic District Development Commission and the city, to take spaces that were sort of not necessarily dead spaces, but just spaces that were empty in the historic district that could use a little color, use a little, you know, vibrancy, and create a place for people to sit and have a little respite, or just sort of look at the river, overlook, you know, the scenery, but weave in some of those texture stories and add to the quilt that is Natchitoches.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, just on I'm guilty of getting very personal on the show, and that particular pocket park, I can't overstate its value, at least for me. Not just the Still Magnolias aspect of it, but just where it's at, the shade of it, the fountain. And then, I lost my own mother, and I went there as a hurting person, grieving alone. I went there not too long ago, and I will say that was the spot to be, because I was something about the story, being attached to someone who lost their mother.
Yeah.
There was a comfort there, and I can't put a value on that, and I can't tell you why. It's just, but again, it's what you said about history. All these little things, these little stories come together, just like the copper lily has a meaning for me. That little park, when I go sit by that fountain now, I will always remember that sort of comfort I got from just being in a place where there's a story attached to somebody else who worked through their own loss and their own grief of their mother.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I mean, it just was very, very healing, like a balm of a soothing balm.
No, it's one of my favorites. And it has to do with just where it's situated. It's a quieter place. It's not sort of off the beaten path.
If you don't really know where it's at, you probably have to go seek it out.
I would argue that one's probably built more for locals than it is for tourists, and just where it is situated. And you're right. It's like someone's backyard. It reminds me of my grandmother's backyard with all the shade and the fountain and
it's right there. You can go to the cemetery.
You can walk through the back to get to the cemetery.
Yeah.
So it's just
I'll tell you a little
Like a secret garden.
a Natchitoches hack, and it's probably something other people do, but I will say that I've never seen anybody do this. And my son's running sound here, and he knows exactly what I'm talking about. When we come up for Christmas festival, we park on the other side. What would that be? Oh gosh, I'm losing my direction. That would be the west side of the railroad tracks. Okay, so we park somewhere on the west side, and then what we do is we walk through the cemetery, by that pocket park, and then we watch the parade. And then as soon as the end of the parade ends, we go back, and then we go through the cemetery, and we watch the parade again from the other side. And it's like, we've always done that. And we're like, yeah, we're getting this, and nobody's in there.
No.
We're just sitting in there, and it's like nice and quiet, and it's super nice because there's this festivities going on and this loud parade and all this color and everything, and then it gets quiet and you get to stroll back through the cemetery and you just sit there in silence and wait. And the lighting is usually pretty that time of day, and it's super quiet, and then all of a sudden you'll hear it coming again, and you get to see the whole thing again.
I've done that plenty of times. My daughter has marched through the parade.
Oh, I bet.
Use that as a cut through.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite places, the cemetery. Now, I don't really have a full grasp of if y'all have any involvement with the cemetery.
So it is maintained by the American Cemetery Association. Actually, the person who maintains it sits on my board.
Okay.
He is one of those who truly does not love the spotlights. I won't name him, but he knows who he is. And I feel like he is just, he is very passionate about history and has maintained that cemetery, oftentimes with, money out of his own pocket to make it.
Really?
Yes. We have assisted with signage, with some mapping. We've worked with the university to have some GIS mapping and of the cemetery, because it is the oldest cemetery in Louisiana Purchase territory. So, sometimes when they're a little haphazard, or sometimes those markers haven't always made it. The wooden markers haven't always made it to today. So we've assisted with some mapping and just some general preservation. It sits on a hill, so it's had some retaining wall issues and things like that. So we've done a little bit of everything with that cemetery. But the association should take more credit in maintaining it.
Well, I anybody that knows me on a personal level knows that if I'm coming to Natchitoches, no matter what it's for, business or pleasure, I'm stopping there at least once. I've laughed there, I've cried there. I could probably tell you at least a dozen of the tombstones, the headstones, what they say.
Yep.
Just because I've walked by them so many times. So yeah, that was like my first place to really touch that history. And then it was like, there's got to be more. There's so much more.
When I was in college, I used to live across the street from the cemetery.
Oh, did you? Right on the west side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the, I lived above the Catholic Student Organization.
Oh, okay. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
House. And so, I think everyone who I've encountered who's gone to school at Northwestern has a story with the American Cemetery.
I imagine so. Well, I mean, what is it? The oldest cemetery in Louisiana, correct? Is that accurate?
In Louisiana Purchase.
In Louisiana Purchase, right.
Yes.
Right.
So.
Which, I mean, that's a big deal. Yeah, that's a significant thing.
I believe its history, it started as the cemetery for the fort. And then it slowly grew out to be a cemetery for the whole settlement.
Wow, interesting.
At Parker Brand Creative Services, we work diligently to build better brands. From award-winning graphic design to media placement, we deliver results that speak for themselves. Are you ready to elevate your brand? Visit parkerbrandup.com today.
So what's next? What's on the horizon? I mean, we talked about a lot about what you've done. In Cane River National Heritage Area has done. What's coming up?
So we are marking our 30th anniversary this year. We've got a number of big events and things happening to not only sort of honor our roots and thank our partners for their continued partnership for the past 30 years, but also, we are really looking at building the future of Cane River and Natchitoches. And for that, our organization is going to be diving into something a little new and exciting for us. We bought a former bank
That's where we're at right now, right?
Yes. It's our office. And we are in the process of working with a team of architects and designers and exhibit designers from Baton Rouge and Alexandria to develop the Cane River Discovery Center, which will become a visitor center, but also a children's nature center. One of the things that we have identified is that we're missing things for families to do, for young people here in Natchitoches. We have a pretty good grasp on historic attractions and charming shops and restaurants, but we don't have a tremendous amount of resources or places for families to go and take their children. And as I mentioned before, we've done a really great job of preserving our culture and our places, but we need to focus now on our natural resources. And what better way for us than to tap into two things that are in need is to create this, think of a children's museum.
Sure.
But all focused on nature and how we use the land today. Our preliminary work with our exhibit design firm really has us focusing on the timber industry, the water, how we use it today, how it was used historically, the plants and animals that are native to this region and how we use those today. We'll talk a lot about agriculture, since that makes up a tremendous amount of our economy. Not only the traditional, crops like cotton and soybean, but we'll talk about cattle and timber, which is huge. We'll also talk about pecans.
Yeah.
We are I think I read right, we are the state's largest exporter of nuts and seeds.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And it's because of our pecan orchards.
Wow.
So
Okay.
there's just this whole story that we haven't yet tapped into and told about how we use the land, how we used it historically, and how we're still using it today.
Wow.
We grow good people. We grow good things, and we grow good people here in Natchitoches, and that's going to be our story that we're going to tell.
You just re-stimulated like a memory that I have when I lived up here years ago. We had pecan trees and those paper shell pecans, and every year we would go down to some of the shops on Front Street and go in and buy like pretty baskets, at different shops, and then we would go and just pick up 5-gallon bucket after 5-gallon bucket of those paper shell pecans. And everyone in my family looked forward to the holidays because they were like, oh, they're bringing baskets of pecans. And so that would be what we'd do. Yeah. We'd have these pretty, they could keep the basket, obviously. It was something from a nice shop, but put a pretty bow on it and be full of those paper shells.
Yes. That's a story. That's a cultural story of a lot of people here on Cane River is gifting pecans or making pecan candies or making pecan desserts from what we harvest here. And it happens that we're always picking pecans in November, and it's just perfect for
It is the perfect time. I'm not going to lie, like full disclosure, I was pretty broke back then. And I was like, how can I get creative in my gift giving? And once I don't know how that happened, I was eating the pecans, and I thought to myself, these are sure easy to crack open. Like I'm used to those little tiny ones, which they're good too, but those I could just crack them with my hand and pop them open. And somebody's like, oh yeah, these are paper shells. I was like, well, I don't know what that is, but I got a lot of them. So I would go out there and just pick them up, like just as many as I could get,
Yeah.
I'll always remember that. I guess I never really thought about that as an export to some degree, a cultural export.
It is. And it's part of that storytelling that we're wanting to move to. So as I said, we've engaged with the architectural team. We are working with our exhibit design firm. I envision that it'll take us about 4 years to complete the process. In the meantime, we will likely build out the front of our house, as I like to refer to it, as a visitor center. So we will be sort of an adventure point for visitors. Our partners at the Convention and Visitor Bureau, they have an office downtown. But as most folks who've been to Natchitoches are familiar with, you get off the interstate and you still have to drive into town.
That's right.
And sometimes you might not be as familiar that there's more to
That's right.
Natchitoches.
If you haven't ever been here, you don't. And that was actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I've always kind of referred to them as the multiple gates, as just something for myself, because I always thought the interstate as a gate. Actually, I've always come through Kisatchie on 117. And I mean, that's probably what a lot of people do. And I don't know how many people do that still. It is kind of bumpy, but I still come that way because I like going through the forest. And So that Hedgewood area right there is my first gate. I always go, okay, I'm in Natchitoches is what I always think, but I still got to go through the second gate, which is the interstate, and then of course, right where you're at is what I would consider the big gate that I always go through, where you see the university, you've got the lake on your left. I always like that moment coming into town, So y'all are right there.
We're right here.
Yeah.
Right, and we're right on what it was, the historic El Camino Real de los Tejas, so the original Royal Road to Texas. It just made sense for us as an organization. We've always sort of never really had a place that was our own. We're a nonprofit, so, it was a shoestring budget in those early years. And we found this place, and it just made sense for what our goals were for the next 10 to 30 years.
Yeah.
Where did we see ourselves when we grew up in our 30s? So
I love it. It's a great location. I mean, even just the proximity to the trail, like we talked about, I mean, you really do have sort of a strategic spot right here.
Yeah.
We've
got lots of partnerships that we're working to build with the university at Grady Irwin next door, hoping that we can develop really this campus that focuses on the natural resources of the region, that through our Discovery Center honors those natural resources, how they were used in the past, how they're used today, and then with our connection to the university, encourage students in education in technology, and sort of continue to build the future of Natchitoches. So
well, that's good news. Yeah, definitely good news.
And I'm happy, I know it.
Hi there, Good News listeners. It's time for Fishing for Goodies, where I take a back seat and let the Good News Fishbowl lead the way. Find the Good News podcast is a personal labor of love using the professional skills and resources of Parker Brand Creative Services. When you share our podcast, you're helping our brand, parkerbrandup.com, reach potential clients. When we're building brands, that helps keep the Good News signal strong. So listen, enjoy, learn, like, and share the good news. Now, let's fish out some good questions for my guest.
There's like 400 and something questions in here. But what I typically ask a guest to do is to pick 3. You are welcome to answer all 3 of them, and we can talk about them. It's a lot of fun. Or you can just say, hey, I found one that I want to talk about. It's really up to you. The fishbowl provides.
Ooh, these are really good. We could get into a whole thing with these, but I think this one is a really good one.
Okay.
It says, describe a time when you sabotaged your own success.
Ooh, man, that's actually a really good question.
Really good one. It is a really good one. And as someone who, I pride myself on doing good work, solid work, but it hasn't always been easy for me. I like to say that I'm a recovering perfectionist. Where
A recovering perfectionist.
Yes.
I like that.
And it wasn't until a few years ago that I really sort of dug into what is the root of that perfectionism and why did I dig into perfectionism? Because at the end of the day, it was stopping me from producing things. It was holding me back from moving projects forward because it wasn't perfect. And
I think we've all been guilty of that at some degree, at some point. Yeah.
But I had this really great leadership coach, who was just sort of walking me through this. And she said, everything you do is good. Like, you've never gotten up somewhere and sort of just fell flat on your face, or you've never sent something in where it was totally flat. We all have things that we can do that need to be adjusted, but the first draft is never the last draft.
Yeah.
Or it shouldn't be. But why are you afraid? She said, why are you afraid to let people see the first draft? Why does it have to be perfect before you do that? And I think that came down after some soul searching of just wanting to be liked and wanting to be perceived as someone who always has it together. It was real deep. But it took me once I figured that out, that it was like this innate need in myself to be perceived as something that no one is. No one's perfect. No one is good or at A+ all the time. everyone has a weakness. Everyone has strengths that, things that they're better at. Somebody might be better at public speaking. Someone might be better at writing. But, just owning your strengths.
Yeah.
And owning your weaknesses too.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that season of perfectionism that I lived through sort of was like a self-sabotage. And I'm here to anyone who is struggling with perfectionism, let it go. Good is sometimes good enough. And the first draft is just that, a first draft. And it's always good to go back and reread and retype and refigure. And, you don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, that is really good advice. It reminds me very much of our original thrust, the philosophy. It was 3 things. It was just do something. Because I worked on creative teams where there was paralysis by analysis. Yes. It was just, and I still work on projects like that today. And I know there's the phrase, the long tail. I don't use it the same way. I always say, we start a project and the person enters the door and then the tail's just continually dragging behind, and you're like, are we ever going to get this whole project in the door or through the door, or is it going to launch? And so many projects have just died before they ever got traction. And it's because we just didn't just put it out there.
Yeah.
Just get it out there, get some feedback from people, see how it's responded to, and then we can pull it back and retool it. It's nothing so drastic that it can't be molded or modified. And I would even say our podcast has been the same way. It's like, okay, an example would be like we used to do breakout episodes called road trips where we went to go to the person instead of coming to the studio. Well, that was us testing the waters. Is it viable? It was viable. Obviously, we're here today. But there were other parts of that road trip thing that we were doing that aren't really viable. So that stuff's fallen away. You're not going to see that stuff or hear that stuff anymore. We just retool and take a risk, put something out there. But I think today maybe people are afraid of being criticized.
Yes.
Because we do live in a digital social media world where you can go to bed and find out that something you said was just misconstrued, or something you didn't even know you were a part of that maybe you're getting swept into, and then you wake up and there's just this wildfire on social media.
Yeah. It makes me thankful that I grew up in an era where this was not a thing, where social media was not a thing.
Yeah.
It makes me nervous as someone who has a 10-year-old who's growing up in that world. And as someone who is a leader on a team where there are young people who are starting out in their career.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the things that I'm most passionate about is letting them figure it out. But sort of being like that, I like to say I'm a big sister. I'm not a mother figure for them. But that big sister that says, it's okay to fail. It's okay to say, that didn't work, and we'll pick it back up and we'll figure it out. Because I feel like in this era, as you said, of instant criticism, instant just feedback, that is probably the scariest thing for people. It still can be for me, I still get the butterflies before I speak in front of a crowd of people, or before we roll out a big project. But just having the courage to do it.
Yeah. I had to retool a branding presentation that I did 10 years ago and re-give it recently. And I was like, let me go look at this. Is this still viable? 10 years, that's a long time. It's like, what's changed? And what I found after I went back through it was like, okay, it didn't require that much dusting off because the core principles are still valid. They're still true.
Yep.
And I did go through them like one by one and maybe modified a few things for outdated language, like where something said Twitter and now it says X or something like that. But really and truly, like for the most part, it was the values of building a brand that were the most important things. And I think that goes into what you're saying about trying something. As long as you know your core values and what you're doing, even if you're experimenting with a project or a communication tool or whatever you're putting out, go back and ask yourself, does it align with my core values? Is this true to who we are? And if you can just sort of say yes to that, then that's going to be like the engine inside of whatever you're doing, even if it's has some bumpiness along the way.
Absolutely. Any initiative that we do, does it align with our values as an organization? And then as we move through that project and we encounter bumpy tracks, are we staying true to the values that we have as a team, the values that we have as professionals and just people existing in the world together, to be kind, to move forward with honesty and integrity, and to always be trying to build community.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, any times where I've had maybe like a negative opinion about something, and I'm answering your question for myself. I don't know if it was career sabotage, but I can definitely tell you, and I don't really even like admitting this, but I definitely know for a fact I lost a client years ago because of an opinion I shared on social media. It wasn't really, I won't say it was anything super negative. It wasn't salacious or vindictive, but it was definitely an opinion I held, and I still hold that opinion. And didn't even think that my client would take it as it was about them, but they did.
Oh.
And I lost that client. We were fired because of that. And then I had to ask myself, I was like, okay, I accept it. I didn't fight too hard, because what I had to ask myself was, okay, so you put this opinion out there on social media, and is that actually your opinion? Like, that's because then you start to realize, like, I said something, but do I believe what I said? I know that seems silly, but we all have done something like that, I think, where we put an opinion and go, God, have I really sat with this long enough? And after I sat with it long enough, I realized, like, oh, I actually do feel this way.
Yeah.
And so what I had to do from that point on was make two adjustments. One, make better choices and say that not every job is the right job.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are clients whose values don't align with yours, and you have to make a hard choice and say, do I want the money? Because yes, that's survival, or is this just too far over the line with what I actually hold to be dear and true? And so that taught me to that. I mean, I said, okay, so now going forward, I can make a better choice, make better choices. They might be smaller clients.
Yeah.
But they align more with my principles and what I want to be able to live with doing and supporting. I don't know. Does that?
Oh, absolutely. There have been multiple times throughout my tenure here at the Heritage area where I've had to navigate between, I sometimes refer to it as sort of that inner ego, or just whether it's more, financial backing, or it is an opportunity that will bring more financial security and success to us as an organization.
Right.
Versus, is it right for our team? Is the workload manageable for our team?
Yeah.
Is this going to put stress on us? Or is this even something that we should even...
Yeah. That we ask that question a lot. Yeah. Is something we should do?
Yeah. And there have probably been, times that I've said yes that I probably should have said no.
Yeah.
And times that I've said no that maybe I could have made it work. But I think that goes to those little choices, those little decisions that we make. But it's just part of growing. Yeah. Growing as a person. Yeah. And learning who you are.
Well, and hearing you say all of that, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about, this, and listening to you and the Cane River National Heritage Area. It is that human heartbeat. I mean, it's so easy for us to just see companies and brands and logos and go, oh, I see that everywhere. What is it? But to actually know the people behind the brand, what they believe and what they feel and what makes they're passionate about, that's what I think is really awesome about you, is I can't really separate the two things.
Thank you.
Like that when I see that logo that's behind you and I see those words, I mean, I immediately can hear your voice, because like I said before today, I've gotten to hear you talk about all the different projects that you've done that y'all have done over the years. And just to actually know that that's what's behind it. That's a beautiful thing. It was a good, the first time I met you was a wonderful experience. It wasn't, I remember coming to your office. I was just up here on a trip and just came by for a visit because we hadn't met face to face before.
Yeah.
In fact, I think the city well, I don't know if I guess it's the city, but maybe just the Natchitoches branding was just at the point where everybody was beginning to adopt something new, and you showed it to me, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And we got to talk and just had a great conversation.
Yes, that's probably the best compliment I've received. I have been with the heritage area for so long and really have just found my home. You know, Cane River is my home, and I love the people. I love the places and the work that we're doing to build a better community and a better tomorrow is something that excites me. I tell my team all the time, I say, you know, this is fun work. Yeah, there'll be times where we get frustrated or we have deadlines that we have to meet that stress us out. But at the end of the day, you should wake up every day loving what you do. And, you know, I love what I do.
I love what you do too. And, you know, you said tomorrow, I can't wait to come back here year after year and experience those tomorrows and see how it changes.
Thank you.
Well, I'm more thankful every moment that I found.
Thanks for listening to another Good News Conversation. If you'd like to learn more about my guests and their good works, visit findthegood.news or visit the links in the show notes. If you found something good in this episode, please subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave an honest review. These small actions help amplify the good news and help us reach far beyond the Louisiana Gulf Coast. I thank you for pressing play and for syncing up with this good news signal.